I always try to put myself in the same position of how I would feel if I were an African American and were driving down from Philadelphia to Ole Miss and couldn't stop at a restaurant to have a burger or stop at, you know, or I had young kids who have to go to the bathroom. How would I feel? And that's why I voted for the Voting Rights Act. And so I think there ought to be a transparency and there ought to be an openness and it ought to be fundamentally everyone should have the confidence to the best ability to trust their government. And I think to have people standing inside in front of the polling booth doing that, and you know, and it did strike me too, coming from Philadelphia. I was born and raised in South Philadelphia, went to high school at John Bartram High School. To see this taking place in a city that I have a warm sort of fuzzy feeling for because I was born there, a lot of my life experiences have been there. I just said, this is not good. There's some things you just see, and you know they're not right. And I saw this, and I said, this was not right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Congressman Wolf. At this point, I would like to bring Mr. Hill, Bull, and Moreau back to the table.
And am I just missing?
Yes, and on behalf of the Commission, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Before we proceed with the Commission's questioning of these witnesses, just some formalities. One, I would like to move the documents that Congressman Wolf submitted formally into the record.
Sure.
And secondly, before I ended my questioning on Bull, I forgot to ask one question. Mr. Bull, did you bring with you a copy of your declaration that you gave to the Department of Justice?
My affidavit?
Yes.
Yes, I have an affidavit here.
And I would like to move that into evidence as well.
Yes. Yes, I'll leave it here.
Thank you.
May I ask the General Counsel, did we receive Mr. Bull's affidavit from the department?
The only the document we received from the department is heavily redacted. Mr. Bull has his full statement. The other witnesses do not have copies of their statement.
Did we receive even, to your knowledge, a partially redacted version? Was his name blacked out?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What are they afraid of?
You. Anything else?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
So that was admitted into the evidence?
Yes. Okay, at this point, we will continue. We were, before we made our little detour, we were about to question the witnesses. Vice Chair Thunstrom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just one opening comment here. I'm having a little trouble distinguishing a line of questioning that seems like an effort to establish the fact that the new Black Panther Party is exactly as they describe themselves, which is, it's not a pretty picture. Distinguishing that from the line of inquiry that informs, and that line of inquiry informs us simply of what we already know. And distinguishing that from the questions that address the issue of clear intimidation. And neither line of questioning, it seems to me, really gets to the matter of the internal DOJ decision to dismiss this lawsuit. But I wondered on the matter of clear intimidation. I've already asked Congressman Wolf what he thought was the definition of intimidation under 11B, and in fact there is no settled definition. But did you see, you saw two women arriving at the polling place and just saying they'll come back later. They were uncomfortable with what they saw. But otherwise, did you see anybody at the polling place who obviously intended to vote and didn't end up voting because of the presence of the new Black Panther Party members?
It was two women and a gentleman.
Two women and a gentleman. These were the people in the car that you mentioned?
No, they stopped at the corner. They came walking down
They
Fairmont.
came, okay.
And they stopped right at the corner of the driveway, Circular Drive, where I was standing on the phone. And they said, what's going on? Truthfully, I didn't really have a good answer for them.
And they said they'd come back later,
And
which they may or may not.
They may or may not have,
Yeah, I
but
understand.
at that exact moment in time, those people were not going near that doorway. And ma'am, I'm not as well versed as you are in this civil rights issues, but they were intimidated.
They were doing, okay. Do we have, I mean, I take seriously when anybody is intimidated. I'm not dismissing that experience of theirs. But, yeah, we don't seem to have any evidence other than these three people. Three people are three people, I agree with you, but nevertheless, it seems to me the case of the new Black Panther Party actually blocking people from voting would be stronger if there were more than three people that we're talking about here.
Indeed, that's true, but you know, I probably wore the uniform of the United States Army Infantry, and it wasn't so that anybody could be stopped. One person is way too many, and not on my watch, ma'am. I was standing there, I saw these guys, they attempted to intimidate me. I'm Army Infantry, I don't intimidate. But they did stop those three people from voting at that second. Whether or not they voted later, none of us can tell, because I don't have their names, we can't check the rolls. But at that exact moment, when those three people walked up, I was disgusted that those guys were standing there and they weren't able to access the polling places.
Can I respond to, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I don't know if the individuals I saw were the same ones that he mentioned. I was standing by our parked car near the end of the driveway, and I only saw, again, I would say three people, but it doesn't sound to me exactly the same. One was an elderly couple who started walking down the drive, and they just thought, I don't know what they thought, but they left. And then one individual later. But I want to say, most of us are lawyers at this table, and we all know that almost every single test of justice, from the Magna Carta to Brown versus Board of Education, comes down to one incident and one individual. Every time. These aren't mass trials of 100 incidents.
Well, not.
If you study the history of
not
justice,
really.
it comes down to normally one individual and one case.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, Brown versus Board, we're talking.
No, but there. You know the point I'm making, that the nature of our system lends itself to an individual person being involved in a
Yes,
proceeding.
I know, but the whole Voting Rights Act was, for instance, built on years and
Of
years
course.
of experience and testimony and frustration on the part of the Justice
Absolutely right.
Department and so forth. And this is really a little different. Look, I mean, I guess in part I ask this because I've got a rather okay, let me just finish this sentence. I've got a rather cynical view of elections, that elections are messy. They're never, across the country in various iterations, there are voting problems. We can't make them perfect. We got three people here who seem to have been intimidated by guys. I don't like the way they were standing around there. I don't like the way they look, and I don't like their voice. But, and by the way, I would not have been opposed to a briefing on this subject. My opposition in my opening statement was to having made this the statutory report.
Okay. At this point, I'll turn to Commissioner Kirschner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to each one of you. You each gave statements to the Department of Justice, correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
When did you give those statements to the Department of Justice?
I can only tell you what it is in relation to the time the complaint was filed, so it's probably a few months, 2 to 3 months prior to that. I believe I just don't recall when the complaint was filed, and the case in Eastern District in Philadelphia.
Okay. Mr. Hill, do you recall?
It would have been early spring 2009. I gave the formal statement that they brought it back to me and had me sign
And
it.
that was before the complaint was filed, to your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bull, do you recall when you gave
I
your
think it was
statement?
January.
January 2009?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, as you're all aware, the Department of Justice decided to dismiss this after the fault having been entered already. And that dismissal was in, Mr. General Counsel, in May 2009? Was the dismissal? At any time in or about May of 2009, did you give any further statements to the Department of Justice?
I did not.